Okay, if everyone can see the slides and my screen, I shall begin. Thanks very much for joining live. I'm sort of going to give a brief overview of Facebook ads, show through sort of setting up an ad campaign, a few examples of ads that work. There's so much I could cover, but just going to try and keep it under an hour, so probably half an hour worth of slides, and then if anyone's got any questions I'll try and answer those. Also feel free to send any questions afterwards and I'll do my best to reply. So yeah, I'll send the recording too. So okay, so I'm doing this on behalf of the company I work for, which is Code 23, which is a web design agency based near Reading. Is normally in these offices, but everyone's working remotely at the moment. But for years we've been offering a web development and software development agency, and recently I was taken on to run social media ads and marketing for them. So that's why I'm doing these webinars, but it is a service we offer. This webinar though is just free training. So and for some people, just give you an idea of what Facebook ads can do. Can I just check everyone can hear me okay? Just so before I carry on, I can see the chat box. So, oh, thank you. That's great. I shall carry on. And do feel free to ask questions in the chat as well. I might not answer them straight away, but I'll scroll back through and answer them afterwards. So, yeah, please do ask questions. And so, yeah, I realised that people want to use Facebook ads for different reasons, either e-commerce or lead gen. Sometimes it's B2B, but primarily it's considered something that was used more for business to consumer. But I've seen a lot of success in B2B ads as well. So I'm sort of going to try and cover a bit of everything in this. And a lot of people, I think, have tried boosting posts and not seen much success. So I just wanted to start off by saying the best way of running Facebook ads is through Ads Manager. And that's the URL there at the bottom. If you have a Facebook account, you just go to that URL and you can use Ads Manager. So all it requires is a Facebook login. You will have to give some kind of payment details before you actually start running ads. But Ads Manager gives you so much more control than running ads via just a boosted post. So it's really worth doing. And this is when you go to that URL, this is all the options that you see. A lot of them I don't use. I don't think there's sometimes more than one way of doing things, but I just use probably just about 5 of those options. The main one though is on the second column, the Ads Manager one, and from there you can see all the campaigns you're running and set up new campaigns, look at old campaigns and see how successful they were, see all the statistics. So there's a lot of information in that one. I'll cover a couple of others later, like the installing the Facebook pixel, and also under the assets column is the audiences, which is where you can set up targeting in advance of running an ad campaign. So you don't have to actually create an ad campaign to set up your audiences, which is really useful, but you can get to it through the Ads Manager as well. So the main option here is the Ads Manager one. Business Manager is for people that are running multiple accounts. So like as an agency, if you're running multiple accounts, you'd use Business Manager, but really it's just a way of using Ads Manager for different companies. So one of the important things, if anyone's ever run Google ads or any other type of social media ads, is that the way the ads are split into sort of different levels. So you have an overall campaign, and that would be for one particular web page or URL. Within that, you can have multiple ad sets, and that's where you set the budget. And then within each ad set, you can have different ads. The reason you'd have different ads in an ad set is if you wanted to test different copy or different visuals, you can test 2 sets of ads to see which performs best. And within a campaign, the reason for having different different ad sets is if you've got completely different ads you want to run, but they're still driving to the same page. So, or you might want to use to target different audiences as well. If you're going to target a different group of people, you'd set up a new ad set. Facebook recently introduced something called campaign budget optimization. So, as of very recently, you can set a budget at the campaign level at the top. And then however many ad sets or ads you have under there, you're just setting your budget once, and Facebook will work out how to split it across the different sets. But I'll try and keep things fairly simple here because, I don't want to create confusion. It's just worth knowing that there are these different levels. So if you've got a campaign running and you want to stop it, it's good to know that that's how it's set up, and that's you'd probably just stop something at the campaign level if you wanted to stop everything. But yeah, I think you sort of get the hang of it as you see the navigation anyway. But you never pay per advert, so you could have 100 adverts running at the same time to sort of test different audiences or test different visuals, but you'd only set your budget once. It wouldn't increase the budget as you made separate ads within an ad set. So I think it's worth knowing. So I've just found, this is just quite an old example just to sort of show what's included within an ad. In a few minutes, I'll actually get into the more practical side of how to set up an ad. But for now, just to sort of run through the main elements of an ad. I think the main purpose of the visual is just to capture someone's attention and stop them scrolling. So you don't actually have to say very much in that image. It's just something that stops people for a moment to look at the ad and then read the copy. So I think it's the next most important bit is the headline. So sort of trying to grab people's attention there as well. If you've already caught their eye with the visual, something that will appeal to them in some way and offer them a benefit. In this example, there's some social proof. I think it makes a big difference if people can see that lots of people have liked or commented, shared adverts. They generally perform better. So there are ways to run ad campaigns that will improve your chances of getting that kind of social proof, which I think then makes other people more likely to click through if they believe that others are interested in the ad. And also the text, you want it to appeal to whoever you're targeting it at. So I think it's important to sort of think through what exactly will appeal. You want to catch their attention, but then show them that you've got something to offer that relates to something they're concerned about or their pain points. And then all ads have got some kind of call to action. These are set in Facebook, so they're sort of you choose from the options available, like learn more. This one says get directions because it's for a physical business, but there's also things like get offer or buy now, those kind of so yeah, there's a selection of different call to actions, but it's important to make sure it does relate to whatever you're saying in the ad copy. And so another example of an ad that I thought was a really good one is this sort of meme style image from Slack. I think it's just definitely sort of intrigue people to stop scrolling and read and then realize that it's kind of really relatable and quite funny copy. And then their value proposition is very clear as well to sort of make work better. So, and learn more is, I think it's often a good one to get people are more likely to click for that than to actually buy something immediately. But that, it depends what you're selling. If it's an e-com business, you're unlikely to use learn more. But if you're trying to generate leads or sell software as a service, then learn more is often a good one, asking people to take some kind of action, but if they've not heard of your company, not expecting them to necessarily buy straight away. So I've just used an example here of a boosted post, although I recommend always using Ad Manager and not just going straight for the boosted post option, which Facebook tries to entice people to do. because Ad Manager's got so many more options, it's definitely a better way of doing it. You can through Ad Manager do these kind of boosted posts though, which means if you've had a post that's been quite well received, you can then reuse that as an ad. The disadvantage of that is that you get fewer options, but if a post has been successful, it's good to push it out as an ad to a more targeted group of people. So there are some good things about doing boosted posts, but I definitely recommend doing those through Ad Manager. On this one, I think because it's got the Amazon image, it's kind of stops people scrolling because it's recognizable, and then it's sort of intriguing, the copy here as well. So I think, yeah, the headline and copy, and this is just for an article, so it's not to actually sell anything at this point, but they're obviously selling products as well. So yeah, just a couple. I've got a few more examples later on, but I thought I'd show those and then run through actually setting up an ad campaign. So yeah, so I'm assuming that everyone will use the URL at the beginning to get to Ads Manager. Let me know if how many of you have used Ads Manager before. It's useful to know sometimes, yeah, if you've used Ads Manager, or whether you've ever set up a boosted post on Facebook. Oh yes, Neil, you have used Ads Manager. It's good to know. I hope this will still be useful anyway. So yeah, for anyone that hasn't, go to that URL, click on the Ads Manager from the navigation I showed just now, and then click on the create button to create the first ad. From there, you'll get an option, and it depends whether you've created them before. This option could be slightly different. So some people will get default to the quick creation, others it will be to the guided creation, but you can change that. I suggest if you've not used it before or not used it very much, it's good to go for the guided creation option. So yeah, so I'd click on that option, and then you get a lot more help as you go through, suggesting what you need to update, what you don't, and yeah, I think that's a good one to start off with. You can still do exactly the same thing on both, but I think it's just a bit more guidance, which is a good thing. So yeah, I'm going to show you what the guided creation option looks like from here. So you'll see to create a campaign, it shows you on the left hand side where you are through creating that campaign, and it's broken down into the 3 levels that I just showed on the other diagram. So you've got you start with the campaign, then within that create an ad set and an ad. You don't necessarily have to have multiple ad sets and ads. You can just have one ad set in the campaign and then one ad within the ad set. So yeah, it's a choice later on if you then want to have multiple ads. Oh, I know someone said the slide is blurry. Hopefully, I think when I send out the replay, everything should be clear. I assume it's just something to do with that people are probably seeing slightly different views depending on bandwidth. So yeah, hopefully you can watch the replay if you want to refer to any of it. It should be clearer. I'll make sure that that's razor sharp before I send it out. So yeah, the view, just to explain if anyone can't see, gives you shows that you're at the campaign. Yeah, I know, I'll definitely send it out afterwards. I'll send out the slides. So yeah, and those will be clear. Yeah, so this is at the campaign level. This is the first bit where you set what your objective is. And I don't use all of these, and I've run quite a lot of different ad campaigns for different industries and different types of products. So the main ones that I use are the brand awareness is quite a good one if you don't have much of an audience already. So I use that one. Traffic is to drive traffic to your website. That's the most well used option. Video views are also good if you've got videos. If you can create video ads, they're the most cost effective at the moment. and generally perform well in my experience. Lead generation, that's also in the consideration column. That is good if you don't have a way of capturing leads on your website. So that's one that I've used a fair bit, and it's and then the other ones, the sort of like catalogue sales, store traffic, those are all for actual sort of e-commerce websites. So they're all good ones to use as well if you've got an e-commerce website. Apart from, yeah, those are some of the other ones. I've not had opportunity to use those ones. So sorry. So yeah, these the main ones that I've used. Actually, brand awareness as well as reach, but those are the ones I use most often. So audiences and targeting, I've put quite a lot of information on this one because I think this is one of the best bits about the Facebook ads. There's so much control of who you're sending your ads to. So yeah, this is probably the biggest part of this presentation. So just going back to the main menu and the menu varies slightly depending on your Facebook account. So something also, when they roll out a new version of the ads manager, it doesn't get rolled out to everyone at the same time. So even though these options stay mostly the same, they can vary slightly, or just the user interface varies a little bit, but the main options will be there just in a slightly different place. So the audiences option under assets is where you can set up your targeting and who you want the ads to run to in advance, or you can go in and alter ones of campaigns that are already running as well. But generally I find it good to set up the audiences in advance here before running a campaign. That might make a bit more sense in a moment when I go through the different kinds of targeting you can do and why you'd want to set some up in advance. So yeah, I often have several different types of audiences ready when I'm planning the campaign before I'm actually ready to set it up in Facebook. Well, there are three types. The interest-based audiences is where you select all demographic information like geography, age, gender, if you know that your audience is within a certain age range or one gender more than the other, but also there's a lot of different interests you can select, and interests aren't just sort of the general kind of interest people might have put in their profile on Facebook. It includes what kind of blogs they read, what kind of who they follow on other social media channels, groups they're members of, and there's so much information in there about the different types of interest that you can select. Often it's hard to think what your target audience are interested in to begin with, but it's quite useful if you've already had a Facebook page for a while to look and see what your current audience are interested in. And as you think of some things, sort of some interests, like for example, I did a campaign recently to sell photography courses, fashion photography, and I typed in a few of the names of photographers that were featured in the course, and then found Facebook was suggesting other similar photographers that I then did a bit of research, and they were very relevant and very similar. So there's actually quite a lot of help from Facebook, and I will show you the Facebook Insights a bit later on. But yeah, the interest-based audiences are really, really powerful. There's a lot there, and I'll show you a screenshot in a minute as well to show some examples. So custom audiences are if you've got an email list, you can, or even a client list, but usually your email list, you can load up the email addresses and run ads to that list. So if you've got, so these are people that will already know your brand and likely be interested and subscribe to your newsletter if you have one. So those are generally really effective campaigns because they're a warm audience that already knows about you and has some interest. And that leads me on to the lookalike audiences, because these sort of go hand in hand. If you've got an email list you can load up, then you can, and you run a campaign that's effective, you can then set up a lookalike audience, which Facebook works out similarities between the different people within the audience, and finds similar people as well. So that's really useful, but they do go together. I'll go back to the custom audiences in a minute, because it's not just email lists, it's also people that have taken action on your Facebook page. So there are some other elements to that, but I'll go into that in a bit more detail in a minute. So if you select, so to set up an interest-based audience, you can, you can see some options here. You start by, I'll give it a name with various, so you can name it how you want, but it's just really for your own reference to go back in and see which campaign it is. I'll always include as much information as I can from the audience in the audience name, like that I've put, this is based around Reading and 40 kilometres, so I'll try and include that in the title, just so I know which audience it is if I've got multiple audiences. But so it's useful to include as much information as you can, but you can go back and change it. So for this, I've clicked on Create New, and I'm selecting people within 40 kilometres of Reading, and age range 30 to 60. I've set it to English speakers, but just because I believe most of the customers I'm targeting speak English, but there are lots of language options there as well. So Facebook then, as you start putting in these details, it gives you a potential reach on the right hand side, and then when you start adding interests, the reach goes down and down, so you're sort of narrowing the audience down to a smaller group of people that will actually be interested in the product that you're selling. And you can see these are ready selected on the right hand side. I've put people who match. I've got some interests related to startups, and then I've put and must also match, and I've put that they're business owners. I'll show you a little bit more in a moment on setting those up, but yeah, just that's sort of a bit of an overview of what the interest audience looks like. So the other kind, so custom audience this is the one where you can either upload a customer list, you can see that option, but you can also base it on website activity as well. So if you have a little bit of code installed on your website called the Facebook Pixel, something I'll cover a bit more later on, but if you have that installed, then you can set up a custom audience. So ads are shown to people that have already visited your website within a certain number of days. I think you can set it up to about 180 days, and you can also set it for people that have just visited a particular page to serve ads to those people. So if you're selling multiple products, it's really useful to be able to send out ads to people that have got an interest in a particular product. It's also good for if you've got an e-commerce site, if people have visited a page, got as far as adding something to the basket, you can then send out ads for anyone that has visited, that has taken action or visited a particular URL. So if someone's got even further and got to a thank you page, they've actually bought products, you could then exclude them from an ad campaign so they don't get sold the same product again. Or you could put them in a list to advertise a sort of related product or something like that. So that one's incredibly useful. These custom audiences based on previous activity on your website. And as well as the customer list, which is sort of your email list, and website activities, you can also send ads to people that have taken an action within your Facebook page or on your other Facebook ads. The main ones that I find useful is sometimes you want to exclude people that already like your Facebook page because they're already getting this information. So in some cases it's useful to exclude that audience, and others it's useful to include them depending on what your objective is. So yeah, that's really useful, the custom audience. I should mention as well that when I'm talking about Facebook ads, all campaigns run to Instagram as well, unless you choose not to. So slightly later down the line, setting up an ad campaign, you get the option to choose whether you advertise just on Facebook or whether it's across Facebook and Instagram or just Instagram. So and I've run some campaigns which have performed really well on Instagram but had no not very little traction on Facebook. So yeah, depending on the type of business, you may want to run ads on just Facebook or just Instagram, or trial them on both and see which one works. Yeah, so, and this is a view of what the lookalike audience is like to set up. So you would have to have created an existing client list or website visitors list already. You'd set that up as a custom audience. Then you can select which custom audience you want to create a lookalike audience of. And these, I've had a lot of, I found these have been performed really well in the past on a few campaigns where I've had a custom audience already, and then run ads to a lookalike of that audience. And I don't know exactly how Facebook does it, but it finds traits that are similar between members of that audience. And I think the bigger the list is, the more effective it is, and the better Facebook can find similarities. I don't think any if you've got a list that's less than 100, I don't think it's that effective, but anything above 100, I believe, performs fairly well, and the bigger the list, the better. One other thing to mention about these lookalike audiences is that you get the option to specify a range between 1% and 10%. That just is how much deviation there is from the main traits. So I think it's less effective as you increase the percentage. I've only ever done run ads to 1% and 2%, and they've worked really well. I've heard that above 4% doesn't perform particularly well for most audiences, but I've never actually run it to that sort of percentage because I don't believe it's that effective. But yeah, it's good to know that exists. So if you were to run a campaign to a custom audience, say your email list or website visitors, and that's successful, it's good to then run that campaign again or extend the campaign to a lookalike audience. So yeah, one of the other things, there are only 3 types of audience within Facebook to select, but I refer to a layered audience is where you can include more than one audience. You can have a combination. You could run an ad campaign and send it out to your email list plus a lookalike audience and people with certain interests. But the really, I think the really powerful thing here that makes a big difference between wasting a lot of ad budget and having an effective campaign is to also to narrow the audience down. So say, like in my previous example, running ads to people that have got interests in, I've put business incubators, sort of e-commerce payment systems. I've got a list of interests, but you then say they must also match. And Facebook does guide you through, so you can see that that's the option. And I've selected that they're also a business owner or CEO. And I think I usually put that they're Facebook page admin as well, because that's usually a sign. Even if they don't run a Facebook page, they'd need to be the admin if they own the business. So it's not just everyone with those interests, which could be a huge audience, and you could potentially waste quite a lot of ad budget. but narrow it down to people who are much more likely to meet your ideal customer sort of demographic, and often exclude groups of people as well. And one of the groups you might want to exclude is if people that have previously bought from you, or you could exclude them for a period of time at least, because you don't want to bombard them with ads. So yeah, no, having a layered audience I think is really important, makes a big difference to just adding a selection of interests and advertising to a huge group. I think it's really worth narrowing it down to people that are much more likely to become customers and buyers. So the next stage, as you're going through the setting up a campaign in Facebook Ads Manager, is setting the schedule, budget and the placements. That comes together. So this is part of the ad set level. You actually don't need to think about the levels. You don't need to choose to go from the campaign to the ad set. Facebook just takes you through. It's only really when you're looking back, it's useful to know that it's split into those different levels, and useful if you want to run multiple ads. But for the sake of setting up one simple ad, you don't need to worry about that. So by default, the budget is set to a daily budget of £20. So yeah, that's what it is by default. So change that if you've, dependent on what kind of budget you plan on spending, what's available. And then the next option is by default, it says run my advert continuously starting today. And I'd suggest not using that option, to click on the other option, the set a start and end date. When you click on that, I'll show you a preview in a minute, but it then gives you the option to put dates and times in. And when setting up a campaign, I'd always start it in a future date, even if you change it later, just because you don't want an ad to start running immediately. And if you do start an ad running immediately, it's just a bit more fiddly to change the dates afterwards. So I recommend setting a start and end date. And then based on the dates you set, it will give you an idea of how much you're going to be spending a week. The next thing is what you're going to optimize for. And this does depend on what kind of, what you're trying to achieve. So link clicks is the one I'd probably use most often, or website visits. If you're running a traffic campaign, you want as many people to visit your website, so that's usually a good option, but that isn't always the objective. So if your objective is just to get more people, or to make more people aware of your brand, or to follow your Facebook page, then you would select another option like brand awareness, or views. I think there's another option for engagement. If you want a post, say, to have a lot of engagement, to give you that kind of social proof before pushing it out as another ad campaign, you might click engagement as an option there. So it is worth considering what you're trying to achieve here. I probably have used all the different options for different reasons, but the most used one is the website traffic. So the next one, where it says bid amount automatic, I just leave that as it is. There's quite a lot of the options that I leave as the default option, and also remember that you can go back and change any of these later when the ads are running. So yeah, it's much simpler to know that you don't need to alter every option here. As you're going through setting up the ads, you see this view on the right hand side that will tell you what your audience size is. It's obviously a bit of a guess, but I find it's quite good to keep that sort of the dial somewhere in the middle, just as a bit of rule of thumb, but it depends. You might be sending something out for a very, very niche audience that are very specific, so it might be much lower in that case. Yeah, it really does depend on what you're selling. Then it gives you an idea of the daily sort of results and reach, which is, yeah, so it's good to know what you can expect there. I think the link clicks is a real guess. I'm not sure that's very accurate at all, so I'd probably ignore that, unless the audience is tiny, and then you've got an idea that you're not going to get many clicks. Apart from that, I wouldn't pay too much attention to the link clicks, but it's good to know what the daily reach is likely to be, whether that's whether your audience is too small. That's the biggest thing. You might make it so narrowed down that you're actually not likely to get many views, so it's good, it's useful as a bit of guidance. So yeah, this is where if you click on the option to set a start and end date rather than going with their default option of running ads straight away. So you click on this little radio button which says set a start and end date, and then you've got a calendar view where you can set your ads to run. I would generally set them to start, even if I wanted them to run immediately, I'd put them to midnight for the following day, because sort of to get complete days, it's better for analytics to be able to look at whole days. And I've also sort of been told from other people that it's good to set them at midnight in your own time zone, because there's a few hours for Facebook to sort of work out audiences and that kind of thing before the start of the day for most people. I'm not sure how true that is, but I find setting them to start at midnight on the day I want them to run works well. So they're running for complete days. It's definitely better for analysing afterwards as well. But it depends what campaign you're running, whether you need it to run immediately or it's something you're setting up for the future. So, but I definitely recommend setting a start and end date, even if you want it to run immediately. Just set it for today's date. So some of these other options, like the cost control, which is optional, I've never actually altered that. I leave that, and always go for a daily budget as well. But you can change that if you want to go for weekly or monthly. So those are the main stages of actually setting the ad up. Then when you get to the end of that, you click. You save the ad and set it and publish it. Sometimes ads start running immediately, but often it can take minutes and sometimes hours for them to go through review. Facebook does them automatically. These reviews are not done by people initially, and there are certain things that if there's too much text or there's copy that breaks any of their rules, they'll reject the ad. And when that happens, it's possible you get an option to click on a manual review where there's actually a person reviewing it. So if you think it's unreasonable, they've rejected the ad, then you can say I think this is unreasonable because, or just say manual review. And often, in most cases, when I've had an ad rejected, I'll send it for manual review and it gets approved. So I think if there's any content like political content, anything related to, I suppose, anything unethical or betting, gambling, anything that's considered controversial, then it's likely to be rejected. But I think selling sort of health products as well can be a bit fiddly. I think they're quite strong rules, especially things like weight loss products. But sometimes they'll reject an ad for just because it looks like there's too much text or something like that. And generally then, if it's done, has a manual review and a person looks at it, it generally goes through. So it's just useful to know that and not be disheartened if your ad gets rejected initially. So I've just tried to pick out a few ads that I think work well. So you get to specify sort of a headline, and a couple of lines of copy will show up on your ad. And then you can choose out of a few different calls to action. So ones I found that work well, this Shopify one, I think the image is quite striking. It probably appeals to the kind of people that are likely to want to sell products on Shopify. So I think that was a nice example. It's kind of aspirational language saying sort of build your store on Facebook. there's probably so many people that create stuff as a hobby and have relatives saying you should sell it online. So I think it sort of kind of uses language that's likely to appeal, and it's quite clear as well. So yeah, that one I thought was a good one. It's obviously a matter of opinion, and different things will appeal to different audiences, but a Procter and Gamble one here. This is a carousel ad, which work really well if you're selling products, especially if you're selling multiple products. It's a good chance to showcase a few different products and just instead of just one image. A bit more effort to create because it involves uploading several graphics, but I think that it doesn't cost more or anything like that. And I've had a good experience running carousel ads. I think that it's a good kind of ad format to go for if you've got multiple images or multiple products. You still have the same call to action. So as you scroll through the slides, you've still got sign up for every one of them, but you can change the text below the image. So you can put on a few lines of text, but you're quite limited in the number of words you can use. I've included this Google one as just because I think the branding is so obvious. It fits in with all the branding, so you know immediately who it is. And probably one of the most important things running ads is to have some kind of offer, so that people know what they're going to get, whether it's a free trial for something, a free download, or a discount on something to actually buy. So yeah, I think it's important to have some kind of offer. And on this one, I've I guess for all the ones that are quite effective, I think use simple language, that the kind of language that the target demographic would use, and some kind of striking imagery that stops people scrolling. And in the case of more famous brands like Google, makes it obvious who it is that's advertising. I've given this one as an example of a B2B ad, because although people generally, a lot of people think that LinkedIn is more effective for B2B, I think that Facebook is actually quite effective, because it's not just, people may not have their job titles and company names in their Facebook profile, but Facebook does have data from other sort of third-party data that relates back to those Facebook profiles. So even though people don't have that information stored in their profile, Facebook has more information than is on individual Facebook page profiles. So I've had some I've had some very successful B2B ads as well. I think it's just slightly different in your messaging. And I think statistics and numbers work well, not just for B2B, for everywhere. I think that's kind of intriguing when there's with things like white papers to say, using statistics works well, and giving away sort of free downloads that then mean you can put people on your email list by offering them free reports. So yeah, I think Facebook does work well for a lot of B2B companies, depending on what it is that you sell. And it's really clear here, putting sort of download now, even though the graphic isn't a button, a lot of people do click on the graphic, and it sometimes helps the click-through rate by putting a call to action on the graphic as well, which they've done here. And then even for sort of unknown brands, freelancers, coaches, I think this is a good example. It's actually quite an old one, but using really sort of relatable copy, I think it's important to sort of build out personas of your target audience, write sort of detailed information about what a typical day would involve for them, what their pain points are, what problems your product can solve, and then use language that's likely to appeal. So people will see the ad and know, actually, yeah, this is for me. This is really something that will help me with a problem. Like, I've only got a small list, but it's sort of kind of, this is useful. I don't have to have a big list. And then a free cheat sheet, offering free downloads often works really well to get sort of to start building an email list of people that are really interested in the kind of product you sell. And I think this is sort of really friendly and down to earth as well. You could almost believe it was just a Facebook post. So for depending on what you're trying to sell, it wouldn't work for Google, but for much smaller unknown brands, I think that's a good kind of an ad. So jumping on a bit from when you're actually running the ad, one of the really good things about Facebook ads and any kind of social media and Google ads as well is the ability to split test or A/B test and sort of get immediate data on how well ads are performing. So you could write a couple of different versions of your ad copy, send it out to exactly the same audience, and see which one's most effective. It's really hard, I think, to guess what will work. So many times that I've guessed that one thing will work and actually it's an alternative copy that works much better. So I think if you have time and budget, it's always worth testing different copy, different imagery and that kind of thing. And Facebook is good for A/B testing. So I'd recommend that, but that's probably a bit more advanced if you've not run campaigns before. So the metrics that you get from running campaigns are really interesting. I think really helps for creating future campaigns and knowing what's working. So even after you've started running a campaign, if it's been running a few hours and you've had some impressions, you start getting this data, so you can go back into your campaign at any time from the same menu you're on before, just on another tab, and then it'll give you quite detailed data about that campaign. So yeah, I've just blotted out the names of them, but that you can get a lot of other information that isn't on this list. You can, where it's got a plus sign at the end, it gives you options of, on that blue plus sign, of other data you can get. I've just put the information, the default, but you can change that if there's other information you want, but that's probably for a later date. But it's so useful to be able to see cost per result. So if, say, the objective of the ad is to get web traffic, it will give you how much it's costing per visit to your web page. So that's really useful to know. And I've seen it vary hugely. I think depending on what you're asking for, the cost per result varies a lot. So if you're trying to get people to sign up and sort of like generate leads for a very expensive enterprise level software, then you'd expect cost per result to be quite expensive. I ran a campaign for selling sort of courses for people to get pharmaceutical qualifications, but they were for very expensive courses, and the leads were costing about £30 per result. But this was for people that were signing up for £15,000 courses or up to that level. So although £30 per email address sounds expensive, it was a really successful and cost-effective advertising campaign. But other times when it's people, I've had another campaign which was lead generation, but it was for a much lower cost course, and that was running about 30p per email address and sign up. And it also depends how good those leads are as well, so that makes a difference. So you'd hope by creating campaigns that only appeal to the right kind of people that they're good quality leads you're getting if you set your campaign up as a lead gen campaign. So for web traffic, it can vary hugely from a few pence per page view to several pounds. But yeah, so that's probably the most useful column to look at as you're running campaigns, to work out whether it's money well spent or whether you need to adjust the campaign. The cost per click is also useful. What this means in Facebook ads is that someone's clicked on the ad to read the rest of the ad copy. It doesn't mean that they've clicked through to your web page. So that's why those numbers vary a bit, the cost per result, even if it's web page visits, and the cost per click. So yeah, that's just worth knowing. Also, you get reach. It usually shows you reach and impressions. Reach are how many people the ad should show to, but because people aren't always online, they might have an ad ready queued up to show to a particular audience, but if those people don't either log into Facebook or scroll far enough down the feed, they count as your number of, as the number of people you reach, but that doesn't count as an impression. An impression, which is actually off the edge of these columns, it's on another column, that's how many people actually saw the ad and it appeared for. So most of this information, you can click on the eye symbol and it will give you more details anyway. But yeah, there's a lot of information here. And one of the really useful things is sort of going a step further, looking at a campaign, particularly if you've run it for a little while. You can click on this breakdown option and then look and see how your ad is performing for different age groups, different genders, and various other different platforms as well. Those are the main, placement. So I find it really useful to look and see, by selecting placement, you can then see how well it's performing on Instagram versus Facebook. If you're choosing to run on both platforms, it's good then to know. I've had a campaign before where on Facebook it hasn't been very successful, but it's still costing half the budget. And Instagram, there are loads of click-throughs, it's much more effective. So you could then go back and turn off one of the options and just reduce down who your ad's going out to and make it so that it's the ones that are performing well already. I've also had that with age group as well, which surprised me a bit. I think I had quite a big age range that was sort of like 25 to 60, and actually 50 to 60 was expensive and hardly anyone was clicking through to the website. So I then removed that age group. So it's really, really useful looking at those in particular. I've found age, gender and placement, but depending on what kind of ad campaign you're running, if you're running something across the country or globally, it's then really interesting to see which regions and countries is performing well. So, and narrow down your targeting after that. So yeah, the retargeting as well is one of the useful bits about useful parts of Facebook ads. I'm sure everyone's had ads that have been shown to them for a website they visited or something, or Facebook page they visited, and that's because of the Facebook pixel. It's called a conversion tracking pixel. And it's actually quite simple. Either if you've had your website developed by a company, it's something that you can ask them to add the conversion tracking code, or if you're familiar with Google Tag Manager, you can install it that way as well. So it's well worth installing it, even if you're not running Facebook ads yet. It's something that if you plan on possibly running them at a later date, by having the pixel installed now, you're collecting data on your website visitors, and you can potentially build up a pool of people that are likely to be interested in your ads, already interested in your website and your products. So I highly recommend having the pixel installed, even if you're not going to run ads yet. And then if you're going to run a funnel where you show one ad for people that aren't aware of your brand, and then dependent on the action they take, if say they visit your website, you can then show another ad retargeting your website visitors, but with information related to whatever action they took. So like I suggested earlier, I think if it said you added to the basket but you didn't buy this product, you can serve those ads just to the people that took that action on your website. So yeah, retargeting is a really useful one. But if it relates to your website at all, you will need the conversion tracking pixel installed. If you have a WordPress website, you can get a plugin which installs the pixel without actually having to add any code. But I think the best option is using Google Tag Manager if you can. And then if you have your website rebuilt, particularly if it's not on the same platform, you don't have to reinstall that or anything. But yeah, and Google Tag Manager is quite an easy way of doing it. So yeah, almost coming to the end of the hour, so slightly overrunning on that bit, but feel free to ask any questions before I get to the end, and if I don't manage to cover them, I will answer them afterwards and send it out on the recording. So this is the Audience Insight tool, which even if you're not planning on running ads yet, is still quite useful because it will give you data about your Facebook page. So if you've got an active Facebook page, it's useful for finding out which demographics use the page most and who's been most engaged. And it also gives you information about other, like it'll give you similar businesses. So it's good for information on competitors to an extent, but also you can type in interests and find other similar interests. So if someone's interested in, say, Lululemon, it will then say they might be interested in, it will list all sorts of other companies that they're interested in the products of. So there's some really useful information in there, and you can use that without actually running any ads. So it's free and it gives you a lot of really useful information. It's good for doing research as well before you run ads, and also for if you want to change ads, it's useful then to know sort of if there are particular interests that are working better than others, to find other similar interests. And part of that functionality is built into actually setting up the ad. So you do get, Facebook will give you suggestions of other similar interests there as well. So there's some overlap with that and seeing it through the Audience Insights, but I recommend having a play around with Audience Insights because there's some really useful information in there. Yes, so almost just a minute over the hour. So if anyone's got any questions you want to ask in the chat, please do. Oh, sorry, I've missed a couple. What budget would you suggest for a small business? I'd suggest probably something. I know that the higher, if you put more in, you can get potentially Facebook will sort of figure out what works, and it's really worth having. So there are some advantages to having higher budgets, but I think for £20 a day, you can run a really effective ad campaign. If you don't have that budget, there is still, depending on what your objective is, if it's just to get more people to like your Facebook page and engage with it, then even £5 a day, you can still get some, I suppose it would still be worthwhile. I'd say ideally £20 for most businesses is probably a good starting point. But yeah, it does vary depending on what your business is, how competitive it is, and yeah, what kind of product you're selling as well. So if you're selling sort of very expensive software, £5 a day probably won't get you many leads. But if you're selling something that's sort of selling products that cost a lot less, then also woodwork classes and karate classes. I mean, I think probably I assume that that's for quite a local area you're selling those to, unless they're online. So you probably can do fairly well with, and I've said it's still worth running ads for £5 a day. I think they probably become more cost effective at a higher level, but I'd suggest running at something like £10 a day, maybe Monday to Friday, depending on when you think your audience is online, testing it and seeing what kind of result you get. And then if it's effective, then starting to increase the budget. So yeah, it's quite good to experiment a bit, work out what works, what kind of audience, messaging and that kind of thing. And when you see you're getting a really good cost per result, then start increasing the budget. Does anyone else have any other questions? And with things like local ads, if you're running it it's obviously you'd set it so you put in a postcode and a certain area, and you're unlikely to there'll be a limit to how much budget you can spend, because your audience isn't going to be massive depending on how interest-based it is within that area. Well, thank you very much to everyone that's attended. Oh, another question. The best way of getting freelance projects to run campaigns. Do you mean running a campaign to get, you're a freelancer and you want to find work? Yes, okay. I think depending on whether you're targeting people in a particular area, as it is, if it's work local to you, then setting up something like probably a website traffic. Assume if you've got a website already, website traffic campaign where you've got a contact form for people to contact you, I think is the best one. If you don't have a website though, getting people to fill out details on a lead capture form on your page might work better. Or just getting people to like your page if you think they might give you work at a later stage. So it's building a bigger audience of people that aren't ready to take action and hire your services, but you then have them signed up to your page, so you've got a sort of warmer audience there to market to. So depending on whether how immediately they're likely to take action and whether you've got a website. I think one of the advantages of sending traffic to your website is that for those people that visit but aren't ready to take action, you can then advertise again at a much lower cost, knowing that those people were interested enough to go through to your website. So yeah, that's why I'd choose that as the first option. I'll hang around for a couple of minutes just in case there are any questions, but if anyone has any questions afterwards, the email address will be on the replay anyway, so I'll send that out. So feel free to ask me any afterwards. And of course, for anyone that doesn't want to run their ads, Code 23, we do run ads for clients, and we will be taking on more clients. So yeah, if you want an agency to run your ads, there's a couple of us there running Facebook ads. So yeah, email me and I can give you prices. Oh, do I have clients worldwide? I mean, at the moment I don't have any clients that are international, but I've worked for companies that, so one of the clients is advertising worldwide. One of the courses that this client offers, we're advertising globally for them. So I do have some experience of advertising to different countries. I suppose I'm advertising to the countries that are places where previously people have bought their course, and then starting to run ads to other countries that aren't so aware of their organisation to see how those ads campaigns are running. But I've probably had, I think there's about 6 different countries I was running an ad campaign to sell these courses. So yeah, no, it's definitely a good thing to do, to run global sort of ad campaigns. I would generally break them up into a different ad set for each country, so you can turn one off if it's not working, that kind of thing. So it's probably a slight bit more complexity, but Facebook's good for running sort of global campaigns. And thank you everyone for attending, and the questions and feedback. I really appreciate it.